Hey there, welcome back to Creepy Encounters. In today's video, booth seeped in dread. Couple in the woods. Glad I decided to be paranoid last night. My pal directed me to this subreddit the other day, and since then I've become obsessed with reading about everyone's encounters, but even more so the conversations that come along with them. It's incredible just how many strange experiences mark our lives. I am sharing this little story because I think it's interesting, I still think about it, and how I felt then, but also to see and hear if anyone else has had a similar thing happen to them before, where it may have been, who with, and why. Last year around this time, I was shopping for holiday gifts around my university with my lifelong best friend. We're both in our early 20s. I was making a point to shop local that year, so we were trawling through a farmer's market that, despite being on my commute home every day, I'd only been to once prior. It is T-shaped. The main aisle is open through the week and includes mostly small restaurants and farmers/produce vendors, while the private seller booths, mostly full of antiques, are perpendicular to it. Only the front of the antique building is open during the week. The back, which was dark and separated by a metal folding gate the only other time I'd been there, is open only on Saturdays and Sundays. Being that it was a Saturday, I was looking forward to getting to explore it. I love digging through antique malls, collecting, etc. We make our way to the back, where the gate would have been separating it. To my surprise, the first couple booths weren't well lit, especially in comparison to the back of the hallway, that stretched further than I thought it did. The bulbs in the main walkway above them were out, while the insides were illuminated with a weak yellow, probably one bulb hanging in each. There was not a soul in sight, and it was pretty quiet, which I found a bit odd since the main section was fairly busy that day, the parking lot full. Usually there is a vendor sitting with their wares, but I never saw one. It appeared that this section took up 4 booths total, 2 on each side of the aisle. To preface this, I'm the kind of person that gets stressed out by hoarder-type settings, so I immediately noticed the overwhelming, almost impossibly crowded booths. Big coats and old dresses hung from metal rods above each booth's entrance, jutting out into the walkway. It seemed like fiction, but at this point, I felt fine. It wasn't abnormal for me to root through junk in places like these, and I was intrigued. I first went to my left, where there was a pile of tea towels so large that the table they were on wasn't visible. Mostly souvenirs. I remember the Liberty Bell on one. There were leather gloves dispersed in the pile as well, which I had been on the lookout for. I tried on a few, but none fit right. Directly to my back, there was a shelf of older glass cups, all filled to the brim with vintage scissors, truly an unimaginable amount of scissors. I wondered how anyone would ever come across that many. The shelf, about as tall as me, was packed with them. This was when the first pang went through me. I left that side, where my friend was standing beside me, and went to the booth on my right. There was only just enough room for one person to walk in. If my friend followed behind me, we'd have to walk out single file. I remember trying on more gloves that were sitting in a pulled-out bureau drawer, and a circular rack to my back with, again, an almost unimaginable amount of belts. I had made a joke to my friend, who was still across the aisle, that it felt like the beginning of Spirited Away, like we were about to unintentionally walk into another world or something. The obscurity and magnitude of collection was so strange to me, and at this point I'd realized I'd never seen anything like it. I noticed the air then. It seemed almost heavy, smelling of stale, sweaty leather, like well-used shoes. The belts were stiff and dry-rotted. I remember touching one. It was then that felt the weight of the air around me on my chest, this inexplicable dread and panic at my center. Like I was swimming in it, walking through something viscous. I do suffer from CPTSD, I do not scare easily, and this felt isolated from my typical anxieties. To this day I am sure that I have only experienced this feeling a handful of times. I'm sure you know what I mean. It was fight or flight, triggered just like that. I had no logical reason to be nervous, but my body was getting away from me. I wanted to be anywhere but there. I knew that I needed to leave. The aisle wasn't visible from the booth I was in, and as I walked out, I remember walking further down it to the next booth. This one on the left had an obscure collection of lampshades, some water-stained, some dry-rotted, and one that I so vividly remember still being on a lamp. With little primary colored clowns dancing on it, a circular pattern. The one on the right seemed to be more clothes, but my memory is fuzzy. I just remember looking for a person staffing it. It was then that seemingly out of nowhere, a short and disheveled old woman came down the aisle with a squeaky little shopping cart. I didn't know where the cart, or the woman had come from, and as she slowly and quietly passed us, my friend standing to my right, both of us towering over her, I saw that there were about 3 pieces of produce spread out in the cart. She looked over to us when she was directly at my left side, and simply asked if we had wanted to buy anything in her cart. My friend was silent, our eyes darting between each other and the woman. I'd finally just politely declined, and I remember her lingering for a moment, walking past me then. Everything had felt so still, so isolated in what little time had passed since entering that hallway. I truly don't understand why I was drowning in that feeling. The best word to describe it would be dread, such strong dread, but for what? As my friend and I walked further down the hallway and ducked into another booth, I could feel it lifting. I could breathe again. I expressed how I felt, and apologized for almost going off on my own, but I for some reason desperately needed to. To my surprise, I learned we were experiencing almost the same gut feeling. I remember my friend saying, "Thank God you talked to that woman." I don't know why, but I couldn't manage to say anything. I was completely frozen. I wouldn't find this encounter so creepy if I'd been alone in the feeling. After all, being who I am, it's sometimes hard to trust what goes on in my mind. It's that my friend felt it as well, and was absolutely dumbstruck when the lady almost materialized out of nowhere, and wasn't only shopping, but offered to sell us what little she had in the cart. We've made jokes about seeing a ghost, but I honestly don't know, and never will. A couple of years ago my partner and I moved into a new house. The street where we live ends on a path that leads along a forest. When we walk our dog we usually meet a lot of people and their dogs, so after 2 years living there we knew most dog owners in our area. Usually we take a long walk together in the late afternoon, so we walk around 4 kilometers along the path into the forest and back. So after living there for 2 years we started to meet a couple and their dog every day at the same spot about 3 kilometers away from our house. They were a lot older than we and a little strange, but our dogs really liked each other, so we had a little chit-chat while the dogs were playing. After a couple times meeting them, they started to drop weird questions about us. For example, if we only play our instruments as a hobby, we never talked about music or our instruments, only about dog-related stuff, and one of the instruments is really rare. First we thought this was just a coincidence, but the question became even weirder. If we like a specific Italian illustrator. This is when I realized that they had to know where we live. Because when you look inside our front window you can see both our instruments and a giant illustration of this specific Italian illustrator, but they never walked in our direction, and we always met them at the same spot. This made us both really uncomfortable and we decided to avoid them as good as we can. Unfortunately this didn't work out well and we met them a couple of times after that. The last time we met they asked if they could visit us at our house. We declined and never met them again. My neighborhood is pretty safe, but as a young woman I'm still not very comfortable walking home from work after a certain time. Usually I get a ride. Last night I ended up deciding it was worth the risk to walk, because getting a ride would have been really inconvenient. However, after I left work I had a bad feeling about it, so I decided to be extra paranoid and fake a phone call. I took out my phone and loudly talked to no one. It felt weird, but I just started ranting about work to nobody all the way home, and I was careful to imply several times that someone would be expecting me home soon. So I'm doing this and feeling like a crazy person when I go through the only unlit area of the street. It's near this community center that has some pine trees and bushes between their fence and the sidewalk. As I'm walking I'm keeping an eye out in case anyone approaches me, and I made eye contact with someone in the shadows. There was a man crouched up in the bushes under the trees, watching me. He had his knees to his chest. He didn't look homeless, he didn't have a bag or anything, and there's not many homeless people in my area anyway. He looked like he was in his 20s, and he wasn't having a smoke either, just hugging his knees and sitting in the bushes staring at me. I looked away and kept walking. I never paused or stuttered in my fake phone conversation, mostly because it didn't fully register how weird that was until I got home. I'm not sure what he was doing or why. The community center is a Jewish cultural center that has a gate around it and doesn't seem to allow outsiders, so it's unlikely he was there for that. I live in a residential area full of apartment complexes. There's no corner stores or bars or anything like that nearby. The area is really quiet at night, and I only passed a couple other people while walking. I can't really think of an innocent reason he would be there, in the bushes in the only unlit part of the street. Consciously I know he probably wasn't dangerous, probably just unstable or upset, but it really creeped me out and I'm very glad I decided to take extra precautions. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more real life creepy encounters around